The studio lights were bright. The cameras rolled. Hey, millions of people across the country were watching live. The broadcast had just begun. It was a high-stakes televised panel on global news networks, hosted from Washington, D.C. The topic was Serious Youth, Race, and Leadership in the 21st Century. Two people sat across from each other under the sharp lights. One was Karoline Leavitt, a fast-rising conservative star. She was young, sharp-tongued, and known for never backing down. Many people in her party believed she was the future of American politics. Across from her sat Traoré. He was only 26 years old, but his name had already started spreading on political blogs and news shows. He had just announced his campaign for Congress, representing a working-class district in New Jersey. Born to Senegalese immigrants, Mamadou had gone to Harvard Law. He spoke with calm strength, the kind that made people stop and listen. The moderator gave a polite welcome, then turned serious. Tonight's discussion, he said, will dive into how race and youth shape leadership in today's America. Let's begin. Karoline leaned in first, speaking fast and sharp. We have a culture problem in this country, she said. Young people are angry because they're told to be victims. We need law and order, not more race politics. Mamadou stayed quiet. Hayes' face was still, but his eyes locked onto hers. Then it was his turn. I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment, Mamadou began. My mother cleaned offices at night. My father drove a taxi for 15 years. I wasn't told I was a victim. I was told I had to work twice as hard to be seen. The audience grew quiet. On social media, the clip was already being shared. Karoline jumped in again. Maybe if your parents focused more on American values, she said, they wouldn't be raising another socialist. The moderator tried to control the moment, but the tension was rising fast. Mamadou didn't react. He waited, then said simply, my parents believed in America. That's why they came here. Karoline gave a cold laugh. Believing in America isn't the same as understanding it. There was a low murmur in the studio. Twitter began to light up. Political analysts on the network's live blog called it a brewing storm. Still, Mamadou stayed calm. He spoke about the kids in his district, how they struggled with poor schools, unsafe streets, and being ignored by the system. He told a story about a 12-year-old boy shot by police last year, and how the family still hadn't received justice. Karoline's face hardened. She rolled her eyes. You always make it about race, she said. Mamadou looked at her. I make it about truth, he replied. That's when it happened. Karoline leaned forward. Her tone sharpened like a blade. Sit down, boy, she snapped. The words echoed. Even the moderator froze. The studio lights suddenly felt too hot. The audience, made up of students, journalists, and political aides, was completely silent. Mamadou stood still. His face didn't show anger. It showed something deeper: disappointment, maybe, but not surprise. He didn't sit. He didn't even blink. The silence stretched. He stepped forward, toward the microphone. Thin, softly, but clearly, he spoke. I can't sit, he said. I've been standing my whole life. Nobody moved, he continued. Standing when my mother worked 3 jobs just so I could do homework on a kitchen table. Standing when my father, with a strong back and a weak English accent, was called a terrorist just for picking someone up in a yellow cab. Standing when teachers laughed at my name but borrowed my answers because I was the smartest. Kid in the room, his voice grew stronger, but never loud. You can sit, he said, turning toward Karoline. Because the system favors you. Because your name opens doors. Because the world was built with you in mind. But me, said, I stand because I have to. 'Cause if I sit, I let the word boy slide past my ears like it's normal. Then I become part of the silence that made me invisible. In the first place, he stopped. There was still no sound in the studio. No applause, no gasps. Only a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The moderator looked down. The producer in the control room whispered into his earpiece. let it breathe. Somewhere in the front row, a young black woman wiped her eyes. A white man in a suit leaned back, stunned. A college student whispered, "Did he just say that, on live TV?" Within minutes, the clip hit the internet. By the time the broadcast ended, the moment had already gone viral. But not because of Karoline's insult, because of Mamadou's answer, because of how he stood and how he refused to sit. The video had barely ended before it took over the internet. In just 20 minutes, MamadouTorres.com, but powerful response was everywhere on phones, on smart TVs, on classroom projectors, and even on subway station screens. The moment was raw, honest, and impossible to ignore. By midnight, #ICAndSit was the #1 trending tag in America. People didn't just share the clip, they shared their stories. Parents posted about the jobs they worked to keep the lights on. Students spoke of classrooms where they were invisible. Veterans said they saw more courage in Mamadou than in some generals they had served under, but not everyone was inspired. Conservative media jumped in fast. Headlines on right-wing blogs screamed, "Traoré plays the race card again, disrespecting." A lady on live TV, an angry leftist, goes viral. But for what? Karoline Leavitt's team released a short statement. Miss Leavitt regrets that her words were misunderstood. She believes in civil discourse and does not believe in identity politics. Mr. Traoré is clearly using the moment for attention. But many weren't buying it. Several of Leavitt's past tweets were dug up, including one where she called young immigrants tools of globalism. Screenshots flooded social media. Critics called her pattern obvious. Meanwhile, Mamadou didn't tweet. He didn't go on cable news. He didn't post a single video or message. Instead, he returned to Newark. It was raining when he stepped out of the black SUV that had quietly brought him home. His team had begged him to stay out of the spotlight for a few days. One campaign manager warned, "This is getting dangerous. You've got threats pouring in." But Mamadou said only one thing: "I'm not running from the people I came here to serve." He walked into a small community center where a few dozen people were already waiting. There were folding chairs, chipped walls, and the smell of old coffee. A woman whose son had died in police custody stood up and hugged him without a word. No cameras, no microphones, just grief and hope. Later that day, Mamadou visited his old elementary school. Kids gathered around, recognizing him. From the video, a boy asked, "Is it true you went to Harvard?" Another girl asked, "Are you scared?" He knelt and smiled. "Sometimes," he said, "but I remember who I'm standing for." Across the country, political machines were spinning. In Washington, Democratic strategists saw an opportunity. One senator whispered to a colleague in a Capitol hallway, "This kid might be the future, or the threat they fear most." Back at Karoline Leavitt's campaign headquarters, things weren't going smoothly either. Her latest interview on a conservative podcast had gone viral for the wrong reasons. When asked if she regretted using the word boy, she laughed and said only that it made him famous. The clip exploded. Even some in her own party began to distance themselves. Behind closed doors, her staff was divided. Some wanted to double down, paint Mamadou as an angry radical. Others warned, if we push too hard, we look exactly like the system he described. Still, Karoline wasn't interested in apologies. "He's trying to shame America," she said, "but I'm not ashamed of my country." The lines were drawn. In the days that followed, Mamadou received both praise and threats. Someone mailed a photo of him with a red X drawn across his face. Another sent a message, "If you don't sit down, you'll be buried down." His campaign office increased security. Police patrolled his apartment building, but Mamadou refused to hide. He told his team, "This isn't about a seat in Congress anymore. It's about who gets to speak in this country and who gets told to shut up." At night, he met with local pastors, union leaders, and students. He listened more than he spoke. And when people asked what came next, he simply said, "We keep walking together." Meanwhile, the media couldn't let go of the story. The New York Times ran an op-ed titled, "The Boy Who Wouldn't Sit." CNN aired a town hall with youth leaders using Mamadou's clip as the opening. NPR invited him to speak, but he declined. His silence made the public lean in closer. Then came the surprise. A French journalist published a blog post digging into Leavitt's background. She had once interned for a powerful Washington lobby group, one that had financial ties to African mining companies accused of exploiting workers. One of those companies operated in Mamadou's ancestral region. The story hinted at something deeper. Now, this wasn't just about two people on a stage. This was about power, history, and a system that didn't like being challenged. The story wasn't cooling down. This was just beginning to heat up. The following morning, headlines shifted from viral soundbites to deeper questions. News outlets, once focused on the firestorm between Karoline Leavitt and Mamadou Traoré, began to ask, who is Mamadou really? And why does he scare Washington? A popular investigative journalist, Leila Khan, took a different approach. She wasn't interested in memes or social media drama. She wanted the truth. By noon, her article was out on a major news site. The Boy Who Wouldn't Sit Traoré Past Leavitt's Power and What We're Not Talking About. The article dug deep. It confirmed that Karoline Leavitt had interned at the McBride, strategic group and elite lobbying firm in D.C., known for helping American corporations secure contracts in Africa, often through shady backdoor deals. One name stood out in the report: Folklore, a mining giant accused of exploiting laborers in Burkina Faso and eastern Senegal. Traoré's ancestral land. Mamadou's grandfather, as it turned out, had been a local union leader who vanished in 1994 after protesting against Folklore's expansion. His body was never found. The village still held ceremonies in his honor. This was no longer just about race or a television insult. This was about legacy, silence, and what happens when history isn't buried but ignored. Back in Newark, Mamadou sat in a small campaign office, reading the article in silence. His staff watched him carefully. Some were afraid. This was no longer local politics. This was global, dangerous. You need to hit back, one advisor said. Leavitt's team is already planning a counter-narrative. They're saying your grandfather was a communist. Another added, you should go. On national TV again, say something before they twist it. But Mamadou shook his head. Let them talk, he said. Truth doesn't need a microphone, it needs patience. Still, the pressure mounted. Karoline Leavitt now backed into a corner, fired back on a major cable news interview. Sitting on a glossy studio set, she leaned forward and said, I never worked for Folklore. This is just a distraction. A smear campaign. The left wants to make me the villain because I speak hard truths. She smiled into the camera, and honestly, if he's bringing up Africa, maybe he should run for office there. The backlash was immediate. Major newspapers criticized her comment as xenophobic. A group of African American veterans called it an insult to every immigrant who ever wore a U.S. uniform. International leaders chimed in. The Senegalese ambassador released a statement condemning racist and imperial language, but Karoline didn't apologize. She tweeted, I love America. I'm not ashamed to put my country first. If the media hates me for that, so be it. Behind the scenes, though, things were shifting. A whistleblower came forward, an anonymous source from inside McBride's strategic group. He had documents, emails, and internal memos. The documents revealed that Leavitt's campaign had received unofficial support from private energy donors tied to African mineral contracts. In one email, a donor mentioned Mamadou's name directly. Watch him closely. His background could cause trouble if he wins. Leila Khan received the files in a brown envelope. She opened them slowly. What she found wasn't just political, it was dangerous. There was talk of influencing local media, planting stories, and using international pressure to silence Mahmouda's voice. When she reached out to Mamadou's team for comment, they declined. But within hours, Mamadou called her directly. "Print it," he said, "but do it right. Don't make me a hero. Just tell the truth." That night, as the nation watched, sports, dramas, and news, a second article dropped online, this one even bigger than the first. Mining, Money, and Mamadou, the hidden hands behind the debate stage. It detailed how American companies had long worked to influence African politics, and how some of those same companies were now funding conservative campaigns in the U.S., including Leavitt's. The article didn't accuse Karoline directly. It didn't need to. The connections were clear. By midnight, reporters camped outside Leavitt's home. Protests began outside McBride's headquarters. And in Newark, Mamadou stood once again, this time in a local community hall packed with high school students, teachers, and elders. He didn't speak of politics, spoke of memory. "My grandfather disappeared fighting for land that didn't belong to him but belonged to his people. They said he was angry. They said he was dangerous. They never said he was right." He paused. "And now I'm standing here, being told the same things." There was silence. Then slow applause. Not forced, not viral, just real. After the speech, one girl asked him, "Are you going to fight back?" He smiled gently. "I'm not fighting to win," he said. "I'm fighting not to disappear." Outside, reporters waited for him. Flashbulbs popped. Questions flew. But Mamadou didn't stop to answer. He walked quietly to his car, eyes focused forward, because he knew this wasn't about one debate anymore. This was about power, and how hard it fights when it's afraid. The country was now fully awake. Cable news ran panels around the clock. Mamadou Traoré's name was no longer just a trending hashtag. It was part of a national reckoning. His face appeared next to headlines about corporate corruption, foreign influence, and racial injustice. But behind the headlines, a much more dangerous game was being played. Karoline Leavitt's campaign was under fire. Her team, once confident and composed, had shifted into defense mode. Major donors were calling with worried voices. "This boy is smarter than we thought," one oil executive reportedly said. "If he connects the dots between us and Africa on live television, we're finished." To change the story, Leavitt's camp came up with a plan. They announced an urgent press event, a town hall on national security to be held in Texas. It would be big, loud, and full of symbolism. On stage, Karoline Leavitt, flanked by retired generals, police chiefs, and veterans holding American flags. Behind her, a giant screen playing footage of riots and protest violence. The message was clear. She represented law and order. He represented chaos. She spoke with fire. "This country is being divided by people who hate its foundations." She said, "While I served this flag, others were burning it. While I followed the law, others made excuses for criminals. You know where I stand." The crowd cheered. That same night, Mamadou held no press conference, no stadium rally. Instead, he appeared at a silent vigil in his hometown. It was cold and raining, but over 400 people stood together in silence. Candles in their hands, photos of victims of police violence pinned to their coats. There was no speech, only names being read out loud, one by one. And when it was over, Mamadou stood at the edge of the circle, surrounded by working-class parents, immigrant elders, teachers, and students. No music, no cameras, just truth. Leavitt's town hall played on conservative stations. The image of Mamadou in the rain spread like wildfire online. A photo of him holding an umbrella over a grieving mother was reposted 1 million times in 2 days. International leaders took notice. In Senegal, Mamadou's grandfather's name was honored during a national ceremony. The president himself sent a letter of support. Burkina Faso's foreign minister publicly condemned U.S. companies for decades of silent exploitation. Pressure began to mount on Washington. Activists demanded a full investigation into the McBride Strategic Group and their political funding. Lawmakers argued on the Senate floor about foreign influence and campaign finance. A bill was introduced calling for new regulations. But things took a darker turn. An anonymous account posted a heavily edited video of Mamadou from 2017 during a campus protest. In it, he appeared to speak angrily against American foreign policy. Conservative media ran with it. Traoré caught disrespecting the troops. Harvard radical hates America. The campaign to discredit him had begun. Some clips were fake. Others were taken out of context. His team scrambled to respond. T's communications director Aisha said, "This isn't a debate anymore." Want to bury him? But Mamadou stayed calm. He sat with his team late one night and said, "If we answer every lie, we'll never speak the truth. Let them smear. We'll keep standing." Then came the real shock. A leaked phone call surfaced online. The voice of a McBride executive could be heard speaking to an unnamed political strategist. The line was grainy but clear enough. "Can't let this kid gain ground. You know the donors won't like it. If it takes pressure, fine, diplomatic or otherwise." He doesn't just threaten Karoline. He threatens the whole structure. The call hinted at using soft influence through embassy connections and media pressure to silence Mamadou's voice. Layla Khan, the investigative journalist, published it immediately. The internet exploded. The U.S. State Department was forced to respond. "We have no involvement in any campaign interference," the spokesperson said flatly. But few believed it. More documents leaked. More voices stepped forward. It became clear this wasn't just about Karoline and Mamadou. It was about what? Mamadou symbolized a son of immigrants, a truth teller, a calm voice in a room built to scream. He wasn't just defying one candidate. It was threatening the entire game. A national debate was announced, Karoline and Mamadou face to face once again. No commercials, no studio filters. Just truth, raw and unscripted. His staff begged him to cancel. A security memo warned of planned disruptions. Online chatter suggested a coordinated smear effort moments before airtime. Others feared for his safety, but Mamadou stood firm. He looked out the window that night, the city lights blinking in the dark, and said softly, "This isn't about winning. It's about being seen." He zipped up his coat and walked out into the night. The stage was waiting. The debate stage looked different this time. There were no cheers, no dramatic lighting. Just a stark, polished floor, 2 podiums, and a live camera streaming directly to millions of homes and phones across the world. CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera broadcasted the event simultaneously. The title, "The Future of Leadership," an unfiltered debate between Karoline Leavitt and Mamadou Traoré. Security was tight. Metal detectors, plainclothes agents, and snipers on nearby rooftops. No audience was allowed inside. Only the moderator, the candidates, and the truth. Karoline arrived first. She wore her signature blue blazer, the American flag pinned to her chest, eyes confident, almost defiant. Mamadou entered shortly after, quiet, calm, dressed in a simple gray suit. No team, no prep staff, just him. The moderator began. "Tonight, we focus on vision, values, and the voices that define our country's future. No commercial breaks, no interruptions. One rule, speak your truth." Karoline went first. She launched straight into her script: open borders, broken schools, dangerous radicals, and fake oppression. She never looked at Mamadou. Her words were sharp, practiced. Then it was Mamadou's turn. He didn't read from notes. He didn't even touch the podium. He stepped forward. "I wasn't born in the halls of power," he began, "but I've walked through the shadows they created." He spoke about Newark, about working-class families struggling with bad health care, gun violence, poor schools. He mentioned the names of victims' kids who died in silence, mothers who cleaned the very offices that ignored them. Karoline interrupted. You talk about pain like it's a badge, she snapped. But leadership isn't about crying over old wounds. It's about fixing what's broken. Mamadou turned to her. His voice didn't rise. What's broken, he said, is pretending wounds don't exist. The moderator tried to move on, but Mamadou held up a photo. It was old, faded, black and white. This is my grandfather, he said. Burkinabe fought in a French colonial regiment. Later became a union organizer in Senegal. He disappeared when he stood up against a mining deal that stole his land. He paused. That deal was helped by an American company, one connected to your campaign donors. Karoline looked caught off guard for just a second. Mamadou continued. They silenced him. Not with bullets, but with paperwork. With handshakes in air-conditioned rooms. With contracts written in English, signed in gold. Then he pulled out a second photo. This one showed Leavitt, young, smiling beside a McBride. Group logo during her college internship. I don't blame you for working hard, he said. I blame the system that lets people rise by stepping on the backs of others and pretending it's a ladder. The studio fell still. Karoline's reply was sharp. This is America, she said. We don't owe apologies for being strong. Mamadou nodded slowly. You're right, he said. We don't owe apologies for strength, but real strength listens. Real strength owns the past. Real strength stands even when the floor is shaking. He looked into the camera. To every kid who's told to sit down, don't. To every parent who's told your voice doesn't count, speak louder. And to every system that profits from silence, your time is up. There was no applause, just silence. The kind that presses against your chest and refuses to leave. The moderator tried to close the night, but neither candidate moved. Karoline stood still, lips tight. Mamadou stepped back slowly. The debate ended without a winner announced, but the public had already decided. By morning, the entire internet was quoting one line. They silenced him not with bullets, but with contracts written in English, signed in gold. The photo of Mamadou holding his grandfather's portrait appeared on the front pages of the Washington Post, The Guardian, and Le Monde. But behind the scenes, chaos was spreading. Whistleblowers kept coming forward. Internal documents from McBride leaked online. Emails showed donations to several political campaigns in exchange for resource access in West Africa. One email mentioned Karoline directly. Another mentioned neutralizing narrative threats. Congress demanded hearings. Karoline's donors pulled out quietly. Some resigned from corporate boards. One key backer flew to Zurich and refused to comment to reporters. At Mamadou's campaign office, the phones rang nonstop. Volunteers came from all over Boston, Atlanta, even rural Idaho. They didn't ask for money. They asked for lawn signs, for flyers, for a chance to stand. Mamadou didn't celebrate. He didn't post victory tweets. Instead, he walked into a local diner the next day, sat with an old teacher and said, I don't want to win a seat. I want to change the room. She looked at him and said, You already did. Outside, the rain was falling again, soft, steady. And Mamadou stood there on the sidewalk, coat soaked, face still. Because sometimes standing was the only way forward. The next morning, Mamadou Traoré's name echoed across the world, not just in headlines or hashtags, but in homes, classrooms, and parliaments. From Newark to Nairobi, the phrase contracts written in English, signed in gold had become a symbol of something larger, the quiet, invisible violence of global power. But for Mamadou, there was no time to reflect. The threats had returned, this time more precise. One anonymous message read, You expose too much. We can still make you disappear like your grandfather. Security was tightened. His phone was locked, his email scrubbed. His team begged him to lie low, but Mamadou refused. I wasn't scared on that stage, he told his staff. I won't start running now. Still, the tension around him was rising like smoke. Leavitt's world was collapsing. After the debate, her campaign manager quit. One of her biggest donors, a Texas oil baron, issued a statement. "We believed in leadership, not scandal." Her press secretary disappeared from public view. She made one last attempt to recover. In a shaky video message, Karoline spoke directly. "To the camera, I never meant to hurt anyone. I didn't know about the donor's history. I'm not the villain they've created." But no one believed her. The people weren't looking for apologies. They were looking for accountability. Congress called for an investigation. McBride's strategic group was subpoenaed. A Senate hearing was scheduled to question campaign finance abuse. And the whistleblowers kept coming. Leavitt was no longer the story. Now the story was the system. And Mamadou had become the face of that storm. Still, he moved carefully. He traveled to D.C. for private meetings with lawmakers. Some shook his hand nervously. Others avoided eye contact. A few were bold enough to ask, "Are you planning to take this global?" He didn't answer. Instead, he asked one question. "Why are you afraid of a man who listens?" Outside Capitol Hill, protesters gathered in silence, holding signs with his grandfather's photo. A group of West African students held one that read, "History doesn't die, it returns." That night, Mamadou went to his old neighborhood. In Newark, not for a speech, not for cameras, just to see his people. He visited the laundromat where his mother once worked. He walked past the library where he'd studied late into the night while others were at parties. He stood in front of the church where his father's funeral was held, and then he went to the cemetery. It was raining again. Mamadou stood in front of a small, unmarked patch of ground next to a tree. It wasn't his grandfather's grave. That one had never been found. But his father had placed a stone there years ago in memory. He bent down and placed a folded newspaper beside his photo on the front page. "I spoke," he whispered. "So you wouldn't stay silent?" Back in Washington, Leila Kanda, journalist who had broken the original donor's story, received a flash drive, no return address, no note. Inside the drive, a video recording, a hidden camera, had captured a McBride meeting in a luxury hotel. Executives laughed while discussing Mamadou. "This won't last," one said. "Oh, they never do. We just wait. Their own people get tired of them." Leila hesitated. Publishing it would set fire to the entire system. It could expose billionaires, shake up elections, maybe even end her career. She called Mamadou. "You want it out?" she asked. He paused. "Then let the world decide what silence is worth." The next morning, the video went public. Panic swept through Capitol Hill. Protests exploded across multiple cities. Young people staged sit-ins at political offices. Activists in Burkina Faso called for sanctions. The French Parliament debated colonial reparations. The UN released a formal statement calling for transparency in U.S. political financing. And Mamadou, he did what no one expected. He paused his campaign. In a handwritten letter, he said, "This was never about winning a seat. It was about opening a door. Now that it's open, I want others to walk through it. I will not run for Congress, but I will never stop standing." There was shock, confusion, even anger. Supporters asked, "Why stop now?" Opponents whispered, "He's scared." But Mamadou didn't respond. He went back to the community center. He taught classes. He helped immigrant families with legal paperwork. He sat with grieving mothers, with hungry children, with forgotten veterans, and still he stood. A journalist from Al Jazeera found him outside the center one evening. "You gave up your chance," she said. "Don't you feel like you lost?" Mamadou looked at her. "I didn't lose," he said. "I made them speak. I made them afraid. That's not loss. That's impact." She asked, "So what now?" He smiled. "Now we teach others to stand." The camera clicked. And somewhere across the ocean, in a dusty village under a setting sun, an old man raised a photo of Mamadou and whispered, We are not silent anymore. The nation was different now. Weeks had passed since Mamadou Traoré stepped off the debate stage, not into victory, but into history. He had paused his campaign, refused interviews, and vanished from nightly headlines. But his silence was louder than ever. His image had been painted on walls in Haarlem, Dakar, and Brussels. Teachers printed his debate lines for classrooms. A senator even quoted him on the Senate floor without naming him. Yet, Mamadou had gone back to the place where it all began. Newark. He lived simply, woke up early, helped at the legal aid center, cooked meals for elders who couldn't leave their homes. To the world, he was a symbol. But to his neighbors, he was still just Mamadou, tall young man who never said no to a knock at the door. But the system hadn't forgotten him. In Washington, hearings had begun. The McBride Strategic Group was exposed on live TV. Lawmakers read from leaked documents that confirmed years of foreign influence, quiet bribes, and electoral manipulation. CEOs squirmed under questioning. Karoline Leavitt, once a media darling, became the center of legal scrutiny. She denied everything, but the evidence had caught up. A subpoena, then another. Her donors vanished. Her PAC shut down. And soon a grand jury was announced. But the public didn't cheer. They watched. Because the story wasn't about Karoline anymore. It was about the door Mamadou had opened and whether it would be shut again. One rainy morning, a package arrived at Mamadou's community center. No name, just an envelope. Inside, a single sheet of paper stamped with the logo of the U.S. House Committee on Oversight. It was an invitation. Mamadou Traoré was asked to testify before Congress, as a civilian witness, as the face of the truth. They could no longer ignore. His team panicked. This could backfire. They'll twist your words. You'll be a target again. But Mamadou.com, as ever, said, I won't speak for them. I'll speak for the people they don't see. A week later, the hearing room in D.C. was packed. Networks streamed it live. Protesters stood outside. Reporters whispered rumors. Was he running again? Was he preparing a movement? He walked in. Without security, no tie. Just a plain gray shirt and the same photo of his grandfather in his coat pocket. He sat, looked each committee member in the eye, then spoke. I am not a politician. I was never trained to speak in these rooms, but I know what silence costs. I've seen it, buried it, and I refuse to let it continue. He talked about mining companies, about corrupt deals, about systems that crushed people without ever raising their voice. Then he paused, reached into his pocket, and held up a small, folded letter. My grandfather wrote this before he disappeared. It was hidden under our kitchen floor for years. I only found it last month. He unfolded it slowly. To my son's children, if you find this, it means they did not let me speak. So you must. No matter the cost, because silence is how they win. And standing is how we remember we belong to each other. Mamadou looked up. I stand because of this letter. Because of all the letters never written. Because too many never had the chance. The room was frozen. One congressman lowered his eyes, another wiped his glasses, and outside, quiet crowd listened through their phones, their radios, their hearts. When he stepped out, reporters shouted, Mr. Traoré, are you planning to run in 2026? Mamadou stopped, turned, smiled. I'm not planning to run, he said. I'm planning to build. The clip went viral instantly, but he didn't post it. He didn't need to, because the movement was no longer his alone. In Detroit, a 19-year-old Somali-American girl launched her campaign for city council wearing a shirt that read, I can't sit. In Louisiana, a former factory worker announced his candidacy, saying, if Mamadou can stand, so can one. In France, students held a protest in front of a mining company's European headquarters chanting his grandfather's name. And in Newark, something simple happened. A little boy, no older than 8, stood in front of a broken-down school building and asked his teacher, can I say something today? She smiled. Yes, She said, "You can stand." The story didn't end with applause or headlines. It ended with echoes, with thousands of small voices finally being heard, and with one young man, coat soaked in rain, walking home alone, not as a hero, but as a reminder that standing, even once, can shake the world forever.